Welcome to the Unriveted podcast, where we talk about technology, the future, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and automation. Today, John, what do you think we're going to talk about?
Well, Martin, we have a special guest today joining us, Matt Cornett, and we're just going to dive into kind of a freewheeling conversation about AI, machine learning, and kind of the state of affairs today, and get a little insight to Matt's experience and his thoughts about the field, if that works for you.
Yeah, it definitely works for me. I'm excited to be joining both of you today and having this really fun conversation, about this field that all three of us have really dedicated our careers to.
Perfect.
Awesome. Just want to segue that this specific episode is brought to you by North Coast Brewing, and this is Old Rasputin, a little on the heavy side, but it will work on a Friday afternoon.
I better go grab one myself. I didn't know.
I've seen both 80 and 87% of data science projects will fail. And I think that's an accurate number. And I wanted to talk about it because I'm on a mission, not only to understand it better, but as a data science and analytics leader to change the course of that number. If we're going to be 87% and potentially jump up to 90%, maybe 95%. Now let's go the other way. Let's start to make these projects successful. We've got, let's call it 20-ish years of data science under our belt with modern computing and modern software techniques. There's a lot of people that have learned how to do it well in some circumstances. And I think there's a lot that we can educate the broader community about in how to think about data science, analytics, AI, ML. I use the terms, I think they're all interchangeably. I think there's this, hierarchy of, umbrella terms that all mean the same thing to me. And at the end of the day, it's all about solving problems with data. And, you use a bunch of different tools and techniques. And that's actually one of the things I want to talk about today.
Perfect.
And it's all about solving problems with data to bring value to an organization at the end of the day.
Perfect. I will follow up that statistical reference you made, Matt, and also tell you from sources that I have read that 62.7% of all statistics are made up. Although I agree, because I have read those too. So I know where you're coming from, is that there is a high failure rate in the data science world. So I just wanted to throw that in there as a funny joke.
Yeah, well, and just to add on to that, I'll say when I saw 87%, I was like, not my projects.
It's a pretty high number.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. But once you start to kind of unravel it, it makes a lot of sense because there's, and it really, for me, it really falls into one of a couple different categories. One of them being the technology. And I think that's what we usually spend most of the time talking about as data professionals, because it's the part that is closest to us. It's the part that we tend to understand the most. And it's the part that we can influence the most, easiest. But there's other components because we're dealing with these terrible, horrible things that we call people. And dealing with people is really challenging sometimes. And so there's a cultural aspect, there's a strategic aspect, there's an organizational aspect, there's, of course, the technology and the data. And to be successful, I really think that you've got to mix all of this stuff together in the cauldron in order to produce a high quality project on the other end. I'm not going to bury the lead. I'm going to say, I'm going to put my stake in the ground right here and say, the main reason that I've experienced that data projects and data initiatives fail is because solutions are not co-developed with other people throughout the business. I always use the example of, somebody asks me for a forecasting model. I go off and build a forecasting model, and it takes me, 3 to 6 months to do it because of some of the technological problems that we deal with. And I come back in 3 to 6 months with a great forecasting model. I think it's a great model. model because I worked so hard on it, got really great predictions, back tested. It generalizes the new data really well. It just really gets some great predictions. And I hand it off to my business partner. And I'm like, oh, well, how does it work? How are we supposed to trust this? This is different from, what we come up with. And all three of us have kind of worked in that, fashion industry. And I think that we've all probably dealt with the same thing, particularly around merchants and planners. And I love working with merchants and planners, but they are addicted to their spreadsheets. And if you come in and say, hey, now I'm going to automate your spreadsheet and I'm going to, produce a prediction that tells you how many things to order, they're like, what are you talking about? Like, there's so much art that goes into it, which is absolutely true. And so when I say solutions are not co-developed, if I would have spent that 3 to 6 months, side by side with a merchant, side by side with a financial planner, side by side with whoever's asking for the thing that we're creating, I have found you get so much better results thinking about it as a co-development. You get much better buy-in from the stakeholder. You get much better adoption on the other side because they have that feeling of ownership or partial ownership because they've been brought along in the process. They're not necessarily the ones building the models. They're not doing the data work. They are helping you to understand the underlying dynamics of what's going to make the science successful, but then also what's going to make the deployment successful. For instance, if I create, we'll stick with the forecasting model here. If I then dump it all into a BI tool and it's a Tableau workbook or Power BI workbook or whatever type of visualization we're looking at, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when I say that?
That's a great question. I have this visualization of something graphical that may or may not answer a question. It may or may not lead to something that changes what I do, but it looks good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But where does your partner want it? 9 times out of 10.
Some alternate way of visualization than I've originally presented.
Mm-hmm.
But that's
well, and isn't that normally Excel?
I think I'm gonna exit the room. Yes, I'm going to make a pivot table for you, and I'm going to open up a new tab. And that is the new big data, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like everything old is new again.
Yep.
But, the problem is if you don't get it where they want it, is it going to get used? Is it going to get adopted at the end of the day? Chances are maybe not. Maybe the thing that you built is so much better that everybody flocks to it. But my experience has been that they are going to keep doing what they've done forever. There's a factor of inertia. Inertia is a very powerful force. There is a fear factor of not wanting to, dive out into the unknown. There's always that job security factor, especially right now, hey, I spend, 3 days out of the week preparing this spreadsheet. That's job security for me because it's so complicated because I'm taking so many different inputs and there's a little bit of alchemy in here and there's a little bit of magic. And then at the end of the day, I put my finger on the scale with what that forecast number is because I've got so much knowledge of those underlying dynamics that I can use my intuition to figure out what the right number is. But oftentimes the truth is somewhere in between, right? So, what if we were in a situation where we've got some type of algorithmic forecast, but it allows that planner, that merchant, to be able to pull on some of the levers, to be able to put an adjustment because they know a promo is coming up that's, maybe not represented in the data, or there's some type of underlying dynamic that's going to change that is really hard to represent in the data. On the back end that not only has better and more accurate predictions, but is used. So all of the time and effort that went into creating it, not only from the model specification and all of the data work that goes beyond that, but then we're thinking about all the downstream impacts of productionalizing the model, making sure that those things, the predictions are traveling that last mile to wherever it needs to be, a BI platform, an Excel workbook, whatever those things are, it all goes to waste if the thing isn't used at the end of the day. So,
right. I agree. And I think Martin and I have seen that, many times before in past experiences. And I mean, I've had this conversation too with folks that are in the field, is that there's this, this invisible barrier, it seems, between the technical development side, the data science side, and the business side, and it's like marry the two shall meet. But I have explicitly asked that very question before, is how are your end users using this product? What are their, what do they like? What do they dislike? What do they trust? The trust factor. I have, again, literally seen that happen countless times in different organizations where, a data science team, and we'll say that includes data engineers, data scientists, ML engineers, ML ops, the entire party coming together that requires, to build out these products. And, they'll have meetings, weekly meetings, twice a week meetings, getting together, and the business side is never represented. And I'll join those meetings and I'll say, don't we have someone from the business side that should be here saying, oh, here's what, providing that feedback, but instead they're kind of creating this thing in a silo. And, to that point is, if you're creating something that nobody's using, it's very much, and I think I've actually posted on LinkedIn before, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound? And this is exactly, could be applicable to this. If you build a machine learning project or product or solution or what have you, and deliver it and no one uses it, did you just spend your money on something that was a worthwhile outcome? So, I think we all agree on that. So I'm kind of interested in your perspective on, what do you do? How do you get a business, and it could be a business that's been entrenched in their ways for a long time, depending on how big of a business, how long they've been around. How do you get a business to understand that when you build out these solutions, it's not just another IT solution or project, it's an entire, everyone needs a seat at the table to understand what we're creating, why we're creating, and how we're going to improve it over time. What's been your experience in getting that conversation going?
Yeah. So for me, and you kind of set this up very perfectly at the beginning, and this was definitely not planned. But you talked about, the data scientist, the ML engineer, the data engineer, and all of these roles getting together to build the thing. And there was one important role that was left out, and that is the data product manager. And so, this is a newish role that's probably really starting to percolate early teens in the big companies. And it really, I put together my first data product management unit around 2015 when I was at Gap. And it was really a game changer for us. And we thought about it both from the platform perspective, but also from the data product perspective. But product management and thinking about these tools that we're creating as actual products, I think is one of the key ways of helping to solve this. Because you've got someone who's now there, who their responsibility is to be able to talk to both sides. And I even hate saying both sides, but let me put it differently. They can talk to all of the different counterparties that are involved inside of a data project like this. So you've got the development team on, the data scientist, potentially a data engineer. And then you've got the delivery team, which is more on the IT engineering side. And then you've got the business who's asking for something. And sometimes those questions go in one ear and out the other, especially if you're a data scientist. Because I know I've had that happen to me before. I've heard a question. I've heard, oh, this is what they need to have solved. And as it's moving through my brain, I'm thinking about whatever cool technique I want to use. Yeah. And then I'm fitting the problem to the solution, which is something else I wanted to bring up. Sometimes these things sometimes data professionals, we've got hammers and searches of nails. But having, and I definitely want to come back to that, but I don't want to go too far down this track because I was talking product management. But I think that having those product manager roles in place are absolutely game changers. I led a data science team at Transamerica, and we had a group of, we didn't call them product managers, but that's essentially what they were. And they were so deeply interfaced with all of the business units that it really helped us to understand what we were building, why we were building, who we were building it for, and what value was going to be created on the other side of that. Now, with that being said, the caution point here is not moving your data team too far away from the business objectives. Because, whoever's building that model still has to, I mean, if we think about what a model is, it's a mathematical representation of some real world phenomenon. Real basic definition, the one we've all been using forever. Understanding that phenomenon is key to building the right model, and not having the business domain knowledge really keeps you away from thinking about all the different use cases, all the different paths you can go down. And so with the product manager being at the center of that business relationship, but also bringing the data team in the right time, the right locations, the right discussions, those are some of the things that I've really found that can contribute to much greater success in driving these projects forward.
I 100% agree and support that. I think the touch point delta that I throw a perspective on is it's generally this called stakeholder management, right? And managing expectation for external stakeholders, and what is the consuming product or service, and how do we measure it's successful, and how do we know we're going in a trajectory that we're intending. And that role of a product manager is a little bit technical, a little bit stakeholder management, a little bit of how do I mold a product service into some blend. And it's really important to, I think, be judged early on ideas and not, go 6 months down the road to then find out you failed. I'd rather have you fail fast, do a quick adjustment. Isn't that what machine learning is all about anyway? So let's be judged early and often. And that's truly agile.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Sometimes the data is going to uncover something unknown. Sometimes, your partners are going to uncover something previously unknown. And these frequent check-ins, I think, really help you to stay aligned, keep everybody involved with development, but be able to course correct, on a fairly short time frame within a week or two, if needed. So I absolutely agree.
Yeah, it's funny. Having done some research on your background, Matt, before our call, and seeing that you also have done instruction and training in this field, which I also have, and I think you've said 2 or 3 things that verbatim I have used in my own training classes. If the only tool in your toolbox is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, in analogies. So we're experts in analogies. But, it's one of the, everything that you're saying is one of the things that I find, and I'll take it from your perspective as an instructor, or, even as a leader that you are in the data science world, is a lot of the education that you see. And I don't necessarily mean at the collegiate level, which it's hard to understand what all of those, what colleges are teaching in that field, since it's still a relatively new degree for a lot of colleges.
SQL. They don't teach SQL.
That's a specific.
Change your curriculum based on that.
SQL is definitely something that I agree. But here's where I'm going with this. Is that you're correct. Here's where I'm going with this, though. Thinking, from your perspective as a instructor to maybe some people that are just trying to get into data science, and from my experience, having gone through and taken online MOOCs, I guess, massively open online courses, and actual in-person courses, and a variety of different educational resources, is that a lot of times when you see these courses, they are very hyper focused on the technical aspects. From a data scientist, it's like, here's some data. They may or may not go into all the upfront work of cleaning that data and even getting it. a lot of people go onto Kaggle and think, oh, well, someone's going to give me a nice, neat data set and I'm going to start building some models in TensorFlow or scikit-learn and then you get to the real world and you're like, wait a minute, that's not what's going on. But, I guess a couple, and I'll ask the first question here. What do you do to during your training or even during your leadership capacity to let people in these positions realize that beyond the technical part, they have to be thinking about the business, the end user side? How do they connect the performance metrics of their ML model in a laboratory environment, root mean squared error, F1 score, all the things you're taught, but how do you teach them that those metrics in and of themselves are not really what drives the adoption or the acceptance of machine learning at the business? Because the business is talking in KPIs and OKRs and all this other, like dollars earned, dollars saved. How do you make that connection between those folks so that they realize, hey, wait, like I'm just one small component of the greater ecosystem here. I'm interested how you do that.
Yeah. So, obviously I'd say there's really probably two components. And then I want to talk about it actually in a bigger picture, because that was something else. You keep setting these things up perfectly and it's not by design. I love it. So one is, the development of empathy for your partners. So that the data scientists can understand, that there are people on the other side of this model, on this output, that are going to rely on it for some type of outcome, and making sure that I draw that connection all the way through for them. The second part is about incentives. So how do we generally, judge and manage data scientists? It is by the quality of the models that they are putting out, whether or not they do things that we ask them to. But it's really about, do you build good models or not? And that's mostly about how we evaluate data scientists from a performance management point of view, where we probably need to carry that all the way through downstream to, are your solutions adopted or not? And that will be a function of, the quality of the model for sure, but also that those stakeholder management components, the delivery of the model, and, kind of making sure up front that you're asking the right question. There's a great quote from Albert Einstein, and I'm totally going to get this wrong, where if I had 60 minutes to solve a problem, I would spend 58 minutes trying to figure out what the question was and 2 minutes designing the solution. And that's totally true, totally the case, because sometimes, what the person is asking for isn't ultimately how you answer the question. And sometimes it takes refinement. It takes a little bit of back and forth to really get to that key underlying question, that dynamic that you're solving for, and then figuring out what the right solution for that is. But the thing that I wanted to expand on that was one of the other notes that I made about failed data projects, and it's kind of in this realm, is bad data science leadership. And so where are we making our data science leaders now? They're all data scientists. They grew up as data scientists. They moved through the rank. We've got a real Peter Principle problem, alliteration, where the career progression is to go into management. And so we've got a lot of super technical data science leaders, which in and of itself isn't a bad thing. But when you've got someone who's a super technical data science leader that doesn't have the interest in solving business problems, in doing that stakeholder management, in organizations where you can't hire a product manager for some reason because they're expensive resources, the leader has to play that role. And I think that we have too many data science leaders in place that are not able to play that role. They can evaluate the techniques, they can evaluate the quality of the model, they can architect great solutions, but they have a hard time carrying that through to actual solving of business problems. And I think that as we grow more data science leaders, I think that that's something that we kind of have to introduce into the curriculum, if you will, because we need that to be a part of the discipline. Otherwise, we're going to keep ending up in this place where 87% of projects fail, At some point, companies are just going to get sick of spending the money, and they're going to go start to buy off-the-shelf SaaS solutions that solve the problem that you're trying to solve, probably in a less graceful and more expensive way. And the company's not going to have any of the IP that goes along with solving those problems. And I think that's definitely a trend that I'm seeing more and more. And I think that it's not good for the field for those of us who actually want to be in business units solving problems. So what do? I think that there's really kind of two things that you do. And one of these I did with my team at Transamerica, which is you create two separate career paths. You've got your individual career path, similar to what we do in software engineering, where you've got, engineer 1, engineer 2, engineer 3, senior engineer, staff engineer, distinguished staff engineer emeritus, and all these different levels that you can go up. But for people who want advancement, they want more money, they want a better title, but they don't want to go into people and function management. And then you've got a path for people who are really in that leadership track. And data science and analytics leadership is different from being a senior data scientist, where you have to think about, what is the business strategy behind this? You have to think about stakeholder management. You have to really believe that your team is not going to be successful without those components, that it's not just about creating the right technical solutions. The other thing that I've seen in this space quite a bit are the companies that are requiring fairly senior data science leaders to be 50% hands-on, 75% hands-on. So actually acting as individual contributors while leading a team of 5 or 6 data scientists. And for anybody who's ever led a team of data scientists, it requires effort. It requires work. It requires a lot of touch points. You're dealing with very, very skilled technical employees. You need a different type of leadership. It's not necessarily being a taskmaster. It's more about being a
coach, mentor.
Exactly. Coach, mentor, dot connector, context provider. And it's hard to do that when you've got so much of your time carved out knee deep in code. I know that, and I don't know if this is the same for everybody. I know that when I'm coding a lot, I don't want to get interrupted. I want to be there with my headphones on, in the zone, focused on what I'm doing. Oh, I'm going to show too much at the top of my head. I don't want to be bothered with, these things that are external to the problem that I'm focused on right in front of me, because as data professionals, when we're working on something, we've got to fit the entire problem space into our head and keep it there for some reasonable amount of time, so that we can progress in solving the solution. A leader needs to be not only strategic, but interrupt focused. What are these things that are keeping people from moving forward? What are these things that are keeping these projects from moving forward? And focused on clearing out those roadblocks, clearing out the organizational roadblocks, the technical roadblocks, so that these projects can progress. So let me pause there and see what you guys think about that.
I think this is a great topic. We could probably talk well over an hour to 2 hours easily. But
I'm a little surprised at what time it is.
No. And for the sake of a wrap up, I think, Matt, this was wonderful having you here.